The morning bell echoed through the crowded halls of Lincoln Middle School, signaling the start of another day. Students shuffled from one hallway to another, backpacks slung over shoulders, conversations buzzing around them. For most, it was a routine day. The same lockers, the same classes, the same teachers. But for 14-year-old Nia Thompson, today would be far from ordinary. Nia had always been a quiet student, the kind who observed rather than spoke out. Her skin was dark, her hair tied neatly into braids that framed her expressive eyes. She loved writing, not just the casual notes that everyone scribbled during class, but real writing. Stories, poems, reflections. She carried her little purple notebook everywhere, a journal where she could pour her thoughts without fear. That morning, she entered her classroom and quietly placed her backpack under her desk. She took out her notebook, flipping to the page she had been working on for weeks. The story was personal, vulnerable, and powerful. Her words captured emotions she rarely shared aloud. It was her safe place. The one thing in school she felt was truly hers. But not everyone respected personal space or boundaries. As the class settled and the teacher began distributing assignments, two girls, classmates who had always teased Nia, exchanged a glance. For weeks they had mocked her, whispering insults about her hair, her clothes, and her quiet nature. Today, though, their target was not just her, but the tangible representation of her inner world, her notebook. While the teacher wrote instructions on the board, one of the girls reached over, snatched Nia's notebook from her desk, and tore a page roughly in half. Nia gasped, her hands trembling, her heart pounding. The notebook slipped from the desk slightly as she tried to grab it back. "What are you doing?" Nia's voice was a mixture of anger and fear. The other girl sneered. "Just seeing what you write. You think you're so special, huh?" A few students in the class watched quietly, some hiding smiles, others uncertain whether to intervene. Nia froze, feeling the weight of humiliation settle over her like a heavy blanket. Her notebook, her safe place, had been violated in front of everyone. The teacher, noticing the commotion, quickly stepped forward. "Girls, what is going on here?" she asked firmly. The two bullies quickly shoved the notebook back onto Nia's desk and muttered, "Nothing." But the damage had already been done. Nia stared at the torn page, her hands shaking, her mind racing. The words she had written, the emotions she had poured onto paper, seemed suddenly exposed and vulnerable. For a long moment, she considered crying. But instead of giving in to despair, something inside her shifted. A fire ignited, a determination that she would not be defined by humiliation, nor would she let her bullies dictate the value of her voice. When the teacher returned to the front of the classroom, Nia quietly picked up her notebook. She flipped to a fresh page and began to write. Not just anything, but a message. A message that would carry her feelings, her frustration, and her strength. She wrote with precision, with passion, with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. The bell rang for the next class, but Nia didn't stop writing. Her pen moved swiftly, almost like it had a mind of its own. She wrote about being seen and unheard, about the pain of ridicule, about the power of self-expression. And then, she did something daring. She addressed it directly to the people who had hurt her. She didn't curse them or lash out. She didn't plead for sympathy. Instead, she wrote with dignity and clarity. She wrote about empathy, about how words, whether spoken or written, can uplift or destroy. She wrote about the strength that comes from remaining true to oneself, no matter how others try to diminish you. By the time class ended, her page was full. Her notebook, once a private sanctuary, now contained a powerful statement that reflected her resilience. She closed it, her heart still racing, but a sense of calm replacing the initial shock. Walking through the hallways toward lunch, she noticed the whispers of classmates. Some looked curious, others unsure how to react. One or two of her friends approached, offering quiet support. But the real surprise was yet to come. Later that afternoon, her English teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, called Nia to her desk. Mrs. Reynolds had always been supportive, noticing Nia's talent for writing long before anyone else did. Today, her expression was different, a mixture of curiosity and admiration. "Nia," she said softly, "I heard about what happened this morning." She gestured to the notebook. "Do you mind if I see what you wrote?" Nia hesitated, but then nodded. She handed the notebook over. Mrs. Reynolds flipped the page slowly, reading each sentence carefully. Her eyes widened slightly as she finished. "This is incredible," Mrs. Reynolds said, looking up at Nia. "You didn't respond with anger. You turned your pain into something powerful. You need to share this with more people." Nia looked down, a little embarrassed. "It's just what I felt." "Exactly," Mrs. Reynolds replied. "And that honesty, that courage, and it's rare. I think this could inspire a lot of people." By the end of the day, Mrs. Reynolds had taken a photo of the page and shared it with the school's principal. The principal was impressed, suggesting that it could be featured in the school newsletter or even shared on the school's website. Nia couldn't believe it. What had started as a moment of humiliation was beginning to turn into something much bigger. The act of bullying, instead of silencing her, had given her a platform. Her words, carefully chosen and filled with emotion, were about to reach an audience far larger than she had imagined. As she walked home that afternoon, the torn notebook in her backpack seemed almost symbolic, a reminder that even when life feels unfair, it is possible to turn pain into purpose. The next morning, the school newsletter published her essay online. Within hours, it had been shared dozens of times by students, teachers, and parents. Comments poured in, praising her courage and insight. But little did Nia know, this was just the beginning. Her story would soon capture local media attention. Headlines would call it a teen's courageous response to bullying. Social media posts would spread her words far beyond her school. And what she wrote that day, in the aftermath of a cruel act, would become a powerful message about resilience, strength, and the importance of finding your voice. Japtumbolo, main section. The morning after Nia Thompson's notebook was torn, the school was abuzz with curiosity. Students whispered in the hallways. Teachers stopped by her locker, and even some of the bullies, who had caused the disruption, glanced her way, with a mixture of guilt and surprise. Somehow, the incident had sparked something bigger than anyone anticipated. By the time Nia entered her English classroom, Mrs. Reynolds had already arranged for her essay to be shared in the school's digital newsletter. The title simply read, "A Response to Hurt and How Words Can Heal." Nia, who had only wanted to express herself privately, now felt a mixture of embarrassment and pride, as classmates nodded in respect or stared in quiet awe. The essay was candid. It spoke about how it felt to be judged unfairly, how words could wound deeper than any physical act, and how resilience often emerged from moments of vulnerability. She didn't name the bullies directly, nor did she shame them publicly. Instead, she wrote with dignity, exploring how one's inner strength could respond to cruelty in constructive ways. Her language was raw yet eloquent, a voice both tender and commanding. By noon, the newsletter had gone live online. Students shared screenshots across social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and within hours, local community groups noticed. People from outside the school began commenting, inspired by the honesty and insight of a 14-year-old girl who had refused to let bullying define her. Soon, a reporter from the local newspaper reached out. She introduced herself as Ms. Carla Hayes, a journalist who specialized in stories about youth and community impact. "Nia," she said warmly over the phone, "I read your essay. It's extraordinary. Would you be willing to speak to me about it?" Nia was hesitant at first. Speaking publicly was far outside her comfort zone. But after consulting her parents and Mrs. Reynolds, she agreed. What began as a small act of personal expression had transformed into an opportunity to inspire hundreds, perhaps thousands of people. The interview was scheduled for the following morning. Ms. Hayes met Nia in the school library, a quiet space filled with the scent of old books and polished wood. Cameras were set up, lights arranged carefully, and microphones tested. Despite the intimidating setup, Nia focused on her essay, remembering the words she had written in the quiet of her classroom the day before. "Why did you write this?" Ms. Hayes asked gently, looking into the camera but speaking to Nia. Nia took a deep breath. Because I wanted to show that even when someone hurts you, you can choose how to respond. You can let it make you bitter, or you can use it to create something positive. That's what I wanted to do. Her voice, steady yet filled with emotion, resonated in the room. The journalist nodded appreciatively. "And what do you hope others take away from it?" "That even if someone tries to tear you down," Nia said, "you don't have to let them. You can find strength in yourself. And sometimes in sharing your story, you help others find their strength too." The interview concluded, but its impact was just beginning. By the next day, the newspaper published the story on their front page. Teen's courageous essay turns bullying into inspiration. A photo of Nia, holding her notebook with a confident smile, accompanied the article. Soon, news outlets and social media pages across the city picked up the story. Tweets praising Nia's bravery went viral, garnering thousands of likes and retweets. Instagram accounts shared snippets of her essay, alongside images of her holding her notebook, and TikTok videos recreated the story, emphasizing her calm but powerful response to bullying. The hashtags stellar words that heal, teen courage, and Nia Thompson began trending locally. At school, the atmosphere changed as well. Students who had once overlooked or mocked Nia now approached her with respect. Some sought advice about handling bullying, others simply offered congratulations. Even the two girls who had torn her notebook avoided direct confrontation. Though Nia never gloatingly acknowledged them, the subtle shift in their demeanor reflected the growing recognition of her strength. One afternoon, Nia received a message on social media that made her pause. It was from a local nonprofit organization that promoted literacy and youth empowerment. They had read her essay and were interested in featuring her in an upcoming citywide campaign about the power of young voices. They invited her to speak at events and contribute to newsletters that reached schools across the region. Nia felt a mixture of awe and anxiety. Speaking publicly, traveling to events, and becoming a role model were daunting concepts for a quiet 14-year-old. But then she remembered the notebook, the torn page, and the fire it had ignited inside her. Her parents, supportive and proud, reassured her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. The following week, she was interviewed live on a local TV station. Sitting in the bright studio lights, Nia spoke with clarity and poise that belied her age. She read a passage from her essay, sharing not only her feelings, but the message that had resonated with so many: the importance of empathy, respect, and the power of words. The audience's reaction was immediate. Calls flooded the station. Viewers posted heartfelt comments online. Parents shared the interview with their children. Teachers discussed it in classrooms, and young writers across the city found inspiration in her words. Nia Thompson's story, born from an act of unkindness, had become a beacon of hope and resilience. Even as the attention grew, Nia remained humble. She continued to write in her purple notebook, filling page after page with reflections, stories, and lessons learned. She knew the true power lay not in fame, but in the ability to transform hurt into something meaningful. Her essay was no longer just a personal statement. It had become a testament to the strength found in courage, creativity, and self-expression. By the end of the month, her essay had garnered attention from national news outlets. Local schools invited her to speak at assemblies, and literacy programs asked her to mentor younger students in writing and self-expression. The bullies who had once thought to humiliate her were now secondary characters in a story that had captured the hearts of thousands. And though Nia remained the same thoughtful, observant girl she had always been, the world around her had changed. Her words had created ripples far beyond the walls of her classroom, demonstrating the profound truth that courage, resilience, and creativity could not only survive cruelty, but thrive because of it. By the time Nia Thompson's essay reached national attention, her life had changed in ways she never expected. What started as a private response to a painful moment had now become a story that people across the country were talking about. The headline that appeared on several news websites read, "Bullies tore her notebook. Her response inspired thousands." At Lincoln Middle School, the atmosphere was completely different from what it had been just a few weeks earlier. Teachers were discussing Nia's essay in classrooms, using it as an example of courage and emotional intelligence. Students who had once ignored her now listened when she spoke. But the biggest change was happening beyond the school walls. One afternoon, Nia and her parents received an email from a well-known youth writing organization. They had read her essay online and wanted to invite her to a citywide youth conference focused on storytelling and leadership. When Nia read the email, she sat silently for a moment. "I think they want me to speak," she said slowly. Her mother smiled. "That's because your words matter." For a girl who once preferred writing quietly in the corner of a classroom, the idea of standing in front of hundreds of people felt overwhelming. But deep inside, Nia understood something important. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to every student who had ever been laughed at, ignored, or made to feel small. A week later, Nia stood backstage at the conference hall. The room was filled with students, teachers, community leaders, and reporters. A large screen behind the stage displayed the title of the event, "Youth Voices That Change the World." Her hands trembled slightly as she held her purple notebook, the same notebook that had been torn. The organizer leaned toward her. "You ready?" Nia nodded, taking a deep breath. When she walked onto the stage, the audience applauded warmly. Some people recognized her from the news, while others were simply curious to hear her story. She looked out at the crowd and then down at her notebook. For a moment, everything felt quiet. Then she began to speak. "I never expected something like this to happen," Nia said. "I was just writing how I felt." The audience listened carefully. She told them about the day her notebook was torn, about how embarrassed and hurt she felt, and how writing helped her turn that moment into something stronger. "But I realized something," she continued. "People can tear paper, but they can't tear your voice, unless you let them." The room became silent. Students in the audience leaned forward, listening closely. Nia continued reading a portion of her essay, her voice calm but powerful. Her words described how kindness, empathy, and understanding could change the way people treat each other. When she finished, the audience erupted into applause. Some people even stood. For Nia, that moment felt unreal. Just weeks earlier, she had been sitting quietly in class, hoping no one would notice her. Now, hundreds of people were listening to her words. But the biggest surprise came after the event. Several students approached her, some shyly, others emotional. One boy said, "Your story helped me. I get bullied too, and I didn't know what to do." A girl added, "You made me want to start writing again." That was when Nia truly understood the impact of her story. Her words were helping people. Back at school, the administration decided to launch a new program about respect and student voices. They called it the Write Your Voice Project, and they asked Nia if she would help start it. The idea was simple. Students could write about their experiences, struggles, dreams, fears, and hopes, and share them in a safe environment. For the first time, many students began expressing things they had never said out loud. Some wrote poems, some wrote letters, some wrote stories. The school started changing. Students became more aware of how their actions affected others. Teachers noticed fewer incidents of bullying. Conversations about kindness became more common. Even the two girls who had torn Nia's notebook eventually approached her. It happened one afternoon near the lockers. They looked nervous. "Hey, Nia," one of them said quietly. Nia turned to face them. "We wanted to say sorry." For a moment, the hallway felt still. The second girl added, "We didn't think it would become something like this. We were wrong." Nia looked at them calmly. The truth was, she had thought about this moment many times, but instead of anger, she simply said, "I hope we all learn from it." That simple response surprised them, but it also showed how much she had grown. Weeks passed, and the story continued spreading online. Videos about her essay gained thousands of views, and many people praised her maturity and strength. Some called her a young leader. Others called her an inspiration. But Nia still saw herself, the same way she always had, just a girl who loved writing. One evening, while sitting at her desk, she opened her notebook again. She looked at the torn page that had started everything. Instead of sadness, it now felt like a symbol of strength. She turned to a new page and began writing again. This time she wasn't writing about pain. She was writing about growth, about how sometimes the hardest moments in life can lead to the most meaningful changes, about how one voice, even a quiet one, can be heard by the world. And as she finished the page, she realized something important. The story that made headlines wasn't really about bullying. It was about courage, and courage, once discovered, has a way of spreading.